Hey everyone, how we doing? It's a nice day for a duck or a goose, depending on your point of view. Thank you for being here. It's a pretty intimate setting, so I'll be more casual in my remarks. There is someone from Wawa sitting right in front of me. When I say something I shouldn't say, that he will tell me not to say that, which typically happens. Couple things. It's good to be back at Villanova. If you're not a Villanova fan, they are ranked #1 in basketball, which is pretty exciting. It's more #1 teams this year in NCAA men's basketball than almost ever before, and Villanova's at the top seat, so it's especially proud to be here. Big game tonight against Xavier, but somehow they're favored by 1 point. I don't get that. That's an aside. So, and Daniel's remarks, he's been an excellent leader in transition of the business school here and has been here quite a long time. And this business school is a unique place. It's really quite special. I'm glad to be a small part of it. So what I want to do is share a little bit about Wawa. I typically don't talk real estate, so I'll just context this a bit. This is from a CEO's point of view. So it will probably be a little bit more high level, my guess would be, than maybe you get in other deal-making details. But just want to give you a little flavor about Wawa, a little context about the organization, a little bit about our culture, which is always important to me to share from my perspective because it should and we think does permeate everything, including even real estate. And then some of our strategies, and then I will dig in a little bit to our strategy around real estate, around stores and growth and things like that. So, and hopefully leave some time for Q&A. So Wawa today, we're privately held. We are employee and family owned. So our employees actually own 41% of the organization through an ESOP, employee stock ownership plan. It's one of the largest in the country. And that for us is near and dear to how we work. Creating that ownership mentality through the organization is really important. So when you walk into a Wawa, we hope that the person serving your coffee or in New Jersey pumping your gas feels like an owner and hopefully thinks a little differently like an owner, not just like an employee. They have the same common shares. We have one common share that I do, that our family does. So they have the same voting rights, that person serving your coffee, as our family does, which is the right way to run business. And we pass through voting rights through our ESOP, so they get a lot of say in the organization. All of our stores are company owned and operated. We are not a franchise model. People have asked me that a lot. We used to have something called a market operator, which was this quasi thing years ago, but no longer exists. 26,000 Wawa associates, not employees, that's our name for it. 721 stores. Daniel mentioned 675. I was somewhere last week, they said 645. We can't apparently update our website quick enough. The breakdown is sort of like this. And Florida being our newest market, we have 85 stores. We opened our first in July of 2012 and has been a continued growth market, but only about half of our new store growth is based in Florida. The other half still is in our mid-Atlantic markets. And what you don't see a breakdown here of is really the counties north of the Raritan River up here is another growth market for us. So approximately $9 billion in revenue is a number that you would find publicly, which puts us at about the 34th largest private company in the country. And that's not a number that we really talk about ever internally because in there are gasoline sales. And we don't think about gas in terms of dollars. Right now, paid $1.60 something this morning. I make about the same margin whether it's $4 or $1.60. So the retail price of gas for us, while it's in the sales and an accountant's point of view, isn't terribly important. So what's Wawa look like in your average day? Today, we'll serve about 1.6 million customers across those 700 plus stores. We'll sell about 500,000 cups of coffee, probably a few more today given the time of year. Roughly 300,000 hoagies, a little bit, about half of that in terms of breakfast sandwiches. 5.9 million gallons of fuel sold, so we do move a lot of fuel. So roughly we have about 700 of those fuel trucks on the road in a single day delivering fuel to us, which is a lot. And obviously a supply chain behind all of this to make sure that Wawa is this thing that hopefully you think of as your single store. Is my cup of coffee hot? Did I get a smile? Is there someone at the register? I don't need to wait in line. That's what we want you to think as a customer. Behind that, when you add that all up, there is a pretty evolved supply chain and logistics operation. We are sort of an Excel train when it comes to trying to move people through our system We love you, but we love you for about 3 minutes at a time, and then we want you to move on. So, and there's a thing at Wawa that I like to talk about. It's the doors are held a little bit longer. And so that's a cultural thing that we think has evolved both from the communities that we serve, but also hopefully the people that are in our stores who are members of the local community. So if you go to a Wawa, how many people were at Wawa this morning? Just show of hands. That's not so good. So when you go to a Wawa after you leave here, what you'll find is that people hold the doors a little bit longer at Wawa versus somewhere else. And our vestibule structure, I think, tends to aid in that process. I wish we could tell you we figured that out. Just happened to luck ourselves into it. But literally, there's a couple extra steps you get at Wawa. Why is that? It's that thing, you know, when you open a door and you're walking and you look behind you to see where someone is, and there's that gray area. Well, at Wawa, the gray area is another 3 or 4 steps. Why is that? Because you're going to see maybe that's your neighbor, maybe that's your friend, maybe that's your son's teacher, maybe it's someone you'll see at the soccer field or at church. Wawa's this community inside of its store. So while we put up numbers like this, it really is about retail. It was that experience with that customer and that associate, that particular one, a good one. And when we do that right, it adds up to this. And so something helping to drive a lot of that is our purpose. And I'll just highlight a little bit of this because it helps influence how we think, how we act, how we make decisions, even on the real estate side to some degree. And our purpose is this idea of fulfilling lives every day. And that simply says is how do you get 26,000 associates with turnover in our industry? While it's the best in our industry, it's still fairly high. How do you get them engaged to want to give the best experience? Yes, there's an ownership mentality, but there's a culture that supports this idea of fulfilling lives. That your job isn't to make coffee. Your job isn't to sell hoagies. Your job is to make that 3 minutes that you spend with that customer the best 3 minutes they have in the day. Whether the need state of that customer is get in and out quick, whether the need state, and we get this a lot, they need a hug, they need an ear, they need directions, they need something special with their order. That's why our associates are there. And when you can do that time and time again and link those 3 minutes together, the nice thing is, well, we only have 3 minutes. We often get that multiple times a week with our customers. So you can really draw a connection over time. And from a branding perspective, that drives an emotional connection with your customers. I won't get into that a lot today. That's more of a marketing presentation, but that's sort of what we strive for, is emotional connection. And so in 3 minutes a day, it's tough, but connecting those 3 minutes over time is really an important thing. And our culture supports that. We think about our culture in 3 ways. It's pretty simple. Who we are, what we believe in, and how we work. And so at Wawa, we're people with goose blood. So yes, the goose is there. We have a lot of symbolism around the goose. And I'll tell you a quick story. Just a few weeks ago, I was with our chairman, vice chairman, myself, in an early morning breakfast meeting talking about sort of senior people in our organization. And and I'm going through experience of those individuals. I'm going through accomplishments and 360 reviews and all of the data that I use in terms of evaluating individuals. And the chairman looks and says, "Does he have goose blood?" Literally, that was his response to all of my evaluation. And what did he mean by that? What he meant by that was, one, humble. And at a very senior level, that really is abdicating your own agenda for the company's, period. We don't believe in egos at Wawa. We have a lot of fun at Wawa, but we don't believe in egos. And so my job, every senior leader's job, is to make sure everyone else's job in the organization comes first. Energetic, we're in a business that's 24/7. And so there's an element of Wawa that's it's always on, it's always fast, it's always moving. In the real estate business, I think you understand that. Trustworthy, obviously. Fun. Motivated is a term that we use, which is, you think about Wawa, it's you dig in, you jump in. Your job may be this, but you're always looking to do this. And that's the idea at Wawa, whether it's at store level, whether it's at our corporate level. And caring. We'll talk more about how that comes out. So we have what we believe in are these 6 core values. Those 6 values aren't from me. They weren't from some consultant. They were from our organization, people over decades that they've been involved that said this is what Wawa stands for. And there are things you can read up there. We value people. We do the right things. And every organization, everyone in my chair would come up and share a presentation and have something similar, frankly. We tend to really strive to integrate this into how we work and think. My evaluation, a general manager of a store's evaluation, twice a year, includes this. So I am judged on specific behaviors from myself, my boss, the organization in my case through 360 reviews. Am I living out the values through my behaviors? We do that across the board. At Wawa, we like to say you can hire people and train them for skills. We move people around a lot. I've spent time in HR, I've spent time in IT, I grew up as an accountant, I was in operations. So the reality is we move people around and believe leaders of people are good in any chair, and it broadens them as people and develops them. But when you have individuals that don't live those values, that's a non-starter for us. So we've had really smart people come into our company from Harvard with resumes that you look at and you would say, wow, I got to have that guy. And they've lasted 6 months because they come in and you realize it's more about them and less about us fitting the values of our organization. We do other things internally. Our internal care team is an example of that. We went to Southwest Airlines, who has a lot of unique structures in their culture, and we mimicked and actually evolved something they do, and we call it our internal care team. I have 10 associates in the executive office whose sole job is to take care of the 26,000 associates at Wawa. Take care of them when there's a time of need, so an unexpected death, and there's costs associated with the funeral that maybe that customer service associate doesn't quite have that money saved, whether it's celebrating a new birth, whether it's helping out at a real emotional time in someone's life. That's about trying to build our values in different institutions in our organization. And how do we work? Last slide on culture. Some cute stuff there. Friendly formation. One thing I do hear a lot from our partners, from our suppliers, one of the questions I always ask is, how are we treating you? And the word friendly always comes out pretty quick. Maybe not from our real estate team. We tell them not to be too friendly, right, Greg? But the reality is it's part of our DNA. We do think of our partners as that, partners, and not someone on the other side of the table. And that's founded in a couple things. This idea of being a private company allows us, I like to say it allows me to have a few more plays in my playbook than a public company. So I think and act long term. When we went into Florida in 2012, I didn't really care about the next 3, 4, 6, 8 quarters of results. I cared about what that market would look like in the year 2020 and how to best accomplish getting to 2020 while making a great first impression. We lost a lot of money in Florida for quite a long time. And we shared that plan, which we like to do sort of for fun with some public analysts. They said, if you were a public company, you wouldn't be allowed to do this. And I said, that's why I know it's a good plan. Because public companies think short term, we think long term. It just opens up, if you will, the playbook a little bit more. This idea of shared ownership I mentioned through our ESOP, we give more in Wawa stock to our ESOP participants than really anybody in the country would give in terms of retirement planning. And that's a big deal for us. I mean, we share our profits. So we talk about this team concept. Bonuses, ESOP contributions are all based on the company's performance. There are no individual team bonuses and things like that. And servant leadership is something, again, I'll save for another day, but the idea there is, and as I think you've heard through this, my job is to serve 26,000 other people, not when I walk into a store for them to all circle around me or me to have a special parking spot at the corporate office. It's not that at all. I mean, we're in the service business. It makes complete sense to have an upside-down pyramid in terms of how we lead, and that is making sure that those frontline associates are empowered and they can deliver that best experience, and that's not by having your more traditional leadership model. All right, so that's a little bit about that. We have culture strategies, bless you, around that support that. I only show you this slide not to dive in, but to say that I'm a believer that when you talk culture, you also have to have those built into your strategies. So we have sets of strategies, which these are just some of the current initiatives that reside under those strategies, really trying to influence and drive our culture. Things from developing a new store leadership structure to better continuous learning at store level to investing in wages, something we term there associate compensation. So really trying to say, let's not just talk culture. Chris gets in front of a group and we talk it, but we actually have plans and initiatives that drive throughout the organization that support it. We also have customer-facing strategies. These are a little bit more fun than what you would expect. We've launched a Wawa Rewards mobile app recently with good success, but it's really a huge learning for us in the last year. We got from a brick and mortar retailer to now we're square in the middle of e-commerce. This year we will launch a mobile order process, so you will be able to order similar to your touchscreen from your phone. We'll test that here in the next couple weeks and hopefully have that rolled out this year. So you'll be able to take that ordering experience with you anywhere you go. And then yes, that could lead to things like delivery, things like catering down the road. So that's a big effort for us. The other element there is it's improving the experience. So if you think about while we have an ordering experience, we have a pay experience, long-term the vision there is really to reduce all the friction around that. I really would want you to come into Wawa for us to know exactly what you want, for you to get it and to walk out. Never have to stand in a line, right? I mean, we're in the convenience business, so our job is to be forward and thinking about there really should never be a line. We hate lines. We like your money, we want you to pay, but I'd rather you pay virtually. I'd rather you pay through some experience that really is touchless. And so we have some R&D initiatives there. We have some partnership initiatives. The world is exploding on that front, whether you talk Google Pay or Apple Pay or whether you talk about other things that are happening in other countries. So there's a lot of work that little mobile app, which is the first element of it, can hopefully open up long term for us. When you look at this idea of perfecting our blue ocean concept, so blue ocean is a strategic framework that we use. And as I was having an earlier conversation, when you think about Wawa and its best day in its purest form, we're a little bit unique. When you go into a Florida market, or years ago, a decade ago, when we went into Virginia and opened up stores, when you drive by a gas store in most of the country, you don't think there's good food in there. You think, I'll never eat in there. And the bathroom's gonna be really dirty. And I'm gonna get gas and I'll buy a soda and that's about it. So dealing with that, it's Wawa's a bit unique. We grew up as a dairy, we grew up as really fresh, perishable foods. Fresh food and differentiating on that is our biggest part of our strategy and economic flywheel. And so our job when you go into a market like that is to tell people, no, our food's good. Yes, we sell gas because that's a need state customers have. And yes, 30% of the time when someone buys gas, they go inside the store, which is great economics for the site. But the reality is you need to figure out in a big, bold way how to get beyond that. Store design, marketing, messaging, things like that. So that's that blue ocean concept where we think we bring gas, traditional convenience, and fresh food together in a way that maybe others don't. And so we have a lot of work we're doing there to think and act more like a restaurant and less like a convenience store in that pillar long term. And then enhance, that's really the strategy around real estate. And so we have been on a journey in the last 2 years to have the most aggressive new store growth in our company's history over the next 5 and really beyond that we have. So we've started that with opening about 50 net new stores each of the last couple years. So we'll do that again this year. And that's about what? That's about, when things are not great during a recession, that's when you take advantage, in my opinion. So we had really readied our balance sheet. So you might think, well, they're a private company. What's their P&L look like, their balance sheet? We fund all of our growth through operating cash flow. So yes, we have debt, but very little for our organization. We're investment grade rated. So when you think about that, that allows us to be conservative. And in times of the market conditions, we can then get aggressive. And that's what we've done with opening stores, building our pipeline. And that's what we're going to continue to do for the next few years. Our model from a cash flow per square foot throws off more cash flow than really almost anyone we compete with on a real estate basis, certainly in our industry. So we don't compete against 7-Eleven for sites. We compete against CVS or banks or others. So from a cash flow per square foot, our model works. It's now how do we build it out more quickly. Remodels I'll talk about as well. That's a big element of the experience. So you walk into your old Wawa, which is your neighborhood Wawa, it feels good, it's familiar, it's comfortable. And yet if you walk into a new Wawa a mile down the road, it's a pretty different place. And so we have a job to do to upgrade that existing experience to really bring what I like to say, that stage where our products and people play out to a better place. All right. So let me talk a little bit more about real estate, dive in a little bit. Current state, you can see a lot of dots. We call them legacy stores, which maybe has a bad connotation. Doesn't mean to, but the yellow are legacy. They're non-fuel. They're stores that have been around for a while. Red are fuel. You can see the numbers, general breakdown. by our Mid-Atlantic and Florida. You can tell in Florida, our plan was pretty clear. Concentrate in the central band of the state, Orlando and Tampa. From a supply chain, from an advertising economics, from simply a critical mass, that's the right thing to do for us. You want to be convenient, you better be on as many corners in this locale as possible. And so our real estate team has done a wonderful job really highlighting those areas with more work to do. But we wanted to get there with some success before we started to look at the rest of the state, which we are now doing. And then in the Mid-Atlantic market, a lot of those yellows, 20 years ago, would have been all yellow. I've only been in the gas business this year 20 years. We've culled that fleet. We've probably built and opened 1,200 stores. But we have a lot less here because we are a believer that you also do not keep a store open if it's cash flow negative. And so, yes, we'll give our new stores some time, but we're very aggressive in culling our fleet or either scrape and rebuilding a store and moving it to the right location. That's important for us. So that's the product of all that work. And so new stores as an element are critical to that. You look at this location, this would be a Florida new store, and you get a sense of this is really the model we think works. Bright gas, lots of space and drive aisles and parking for the volume we have. Yes, you might say that the Wawa parking lot's still maybe the most dangerous place to be most days, but we try to engineer around that quite significantly. The store integrates, so there's a lot of openness by design here. We used to have a lot of other spanners and other things that really clogged this up, but we've opened this up to give more of a view into the store. In Florida, we have really floor-to-ceiling glass to allow people to look in. And so design and those elements are critical for us in new stores. But when you look at this store in Florida, sure, a Mid-Atlantic store will look different a bit, but a legacy store will look really different. And that was the genesis around our remodels. Our legacy stores that are left from our culling process over the years, our evolution, are really profitable for us. And so in a lot of those do not reside in places where we can add gas, we can buy land around. A lot of those are places where we want to invest in that legacy store or potentially even, like we'll do in one site this year, move it across the street and without gas, which is something that hasn't been an arrow in our quiver until this year, really. So, site criteria. What's it mean to go after a new store? We have a lot of site criteria. Some of this we're a little bit more flexible on. So freestanding is really important for us. We do have a store down in Center City we opened last September, which has done wonderfully. Not freestanding, that is a strategy we'll continue to pursue a little bit more aggressively. But generally we are looking for a freestanding 1.6 to 3 acres. We like them bigger. Corner location. So as we like to say, our guys tell me, everyone that comes through our governance process, this is on the corner of Main and Main. There's a lot of Main and Mains in the world in your real estate lingo. So, but that's what we look for. Great access is really important to us. When we walk away, at least from my perspective, when we walk away for a site, when it gets to me, it's because of access. Because you're on roads that have 50,000 plus cars going in multiple directions. You really need good signalized but other access. Demographics, we look at 4-minute drive times. We're continuing to evolve through analytics, how we look at all of this. You can see some of the target there and on traffic. You know, a lot of sites, when you go into a new market, we try to err higher to try and give us a better sense of let's get the A sites. Let's open in the areas that really we're going to be more successful in out of the gate. And when there's no Wawas, you have an opportunity to do that. So we'll look for 50,000 cars plus in a Florida market. Not all the time, but that's out of the gate. And then you look at the site plan criteria. So the colors of the different markets here represent our internal team. So we have an internal team of great seasoned and a mix of new real estate managers that work with our brokers, work with some of you in the room, work with our developer partners, and they try to really go after growth in a very targeted way. So we have network plans for each of these areas that we share with our teams internally and externally. And we try and focus on when you can see an area broken up like North Jersey as much, and there's probably going to be more shades in here, that's because we have more people focused on a new area. We want more sites there. So North Jersey is clearly an opportunity for us, we think. And when you think of a North Jersey versus a Florida, in Florida it takes 6 to 12 months from we sign to get a store open. That was a good one, actually. And in New Jersey, it takes 3 to 5 years. And so just the law of economics, it takes a lot longer to get a return on your site in a state like New Jersey, PA, versus a state like Florida. That's one of the benefits of Florida as well for us. And that pipeline, what does it look like right now? So we'll open, I think you saw 47. We're shooting for 50 this year, 50 to 55 each of the next few years ahead of us. And the idea would be to continue to grow beyond that, both in the Mid-Atlantic and Florida. So when you look at how many sites we have out under contract, so that pipeline, and then you start to say, well, why is your pipeline so big? Well, the reality is because it takes a long time for these sites to come through that pipeline. That would be a wonderful thing if government would work more efficiently, but that's all I'll say. And then the Florida market, less sites, but again, they're coming through that pipe much quicker. And store design is really important for us. So from a new store design, from a governance perspective, we have a real estate team. It was a lot of governance to get a site into a senior leadership team, so we'll approve each of our new sites. And then the model itself. We always have to evolve that model. So there's a operating platform team and there's a branding team. Operating platform team goes back to the comment I said before. We put, in that big store there, we'll put 20,000 people a week through the doors, 10,000 people a week on the site for gas. It's a 5,000 square foot box with 33,000 square foot of retail space. So we go through everything really quickly. Every equipment manufacturer we work with to try to rebuild their equipment for our volumes, they always fail more quickly. Gas, same thing. Flooring, same thing. You name it. And we have a team on the operating platform that is, their job is to get people through as quick as possible and to enable both backline, the associates, as well as the customers. Sometimes we make you do some of the labor, like self-serve coffee. Sometimes we do some of the labor for you, and that's all around trying to engineer the experience to be as quick as possible. The branding team, which I sit on, is all about what's the emotion we want you to feel when you come into our stores, and always trying to balance that. I'd lie to you if I told you we had that figured out. We don't. It's always a war. The functional team, the store would look completely different. The branding team, it would look completely different. This is the marriage of those two ideas. So branding is about when you walk in, and we want you to have this experience. Yes, the people are the biggest element of that, but what's the store denote in terms of the emotions you feel? Is it bright? Is it open? Is it clean? Is it well lit? Is the functional aspects even and how they shape out? So that coffee island that you see where you'll make your coffee tomorrow morning, that is engineered to an inch. And there's a warehouse with about 30 different designs that we've tried over the year to engineer every inch of that. And then what we'll do is bring real scripts in of sales into a store that we build inside of a warehouse, and we'll run fake customers, if you will, through that to just sit and watch and engineer that. So store design is an interesting animal that we're always fighting over functional versus branding and emotional. But colors, materials, textures, which you'll see if you were to go down to a Broad and Walnut store, is our latest in terms of branding from really the fixture point of view. That will become and influence a lot of our future remodels. Kitchen is a huge, huge focal point. So this was an argument between branding and functional. In Florida, when you open up the door, see in retail, you guys know retail, you build these stores, and you open up the door, there's that moment of compression or decompression, where someone's meant to have, when they walk into a store, this moment of relax, exhale, exhale, and you see what's going on, you can shop the store. In Florida, within 11 feet of our front door, we put a kitchen design, which is basically this picture here. So 11 feet in. That is not enough to decompress, but it is enough for people to say, whoa, people working, kitchen, ovens, steam, they're in the food business. Going back to the comment of when we got into Florida, we wanted people to hit them over the head with every marketing tool possible of, we're in the food business. Don't come in here to buy a bag of chips and a Coke. We want you to buy our fresh food. And that was part of the element of, from a branding perspective, driving that. The functional team has since gone back and redone the whole entire kitchen behind it, because what we found is it worked, and we were selling twice the amount of hoagies per store in Florida when we first opened them up here, which was shocking to us, and we were not prepared for that at all. So there's a fun way of how design fits into all of this. So new store growth, there's a budget book, and our team appropriately is being reconciling to that. But our target this year is 50 new stores, roughly half in these markets, half in Florida. We will enter and open stores in the east coast of Florida. So you saw that chart before. We are now starting to go down towards the east coast. So you're talking about Port St. Lucie and those types of areas, which for us, we could open more stores. Our real estate team, like you, they want to get out and get more dirt and more stores through the pipeline. Our biggest constrictor is people. And so we have to have a plan to get people moved, relocated from this market and also from the other Florida markets, ready to open those stores to give that experience. So that's part of the timing for us. Southeast Florida, which we think will be the biggest, I believe will be the most profitable of the markets in Florida, will open in 2017 to 18, which there's going to be a tremendous amount of store growth there. That will be more a little bit like the Northern Jersey model of a lot of redevelopment, a lot of challenge, and less green space than we have in the other areas. We do spend a lot per store, which means our bar around governance and around site selection has to be high. When we miss, we sort of miss big. When you spend $6 million on a site and it doesn't perform, it hurts. We don't expect perfect batting average, but I would say our real estate team does pretty well in that, in the governance and the analytics and their own personal experience. All right, a couple things on remodels and we'll wrap up. So that's new stores. Remodels are equally as important. Like I said, we want to remodel our whole existing fleet of stores to look new by the end of this decade. That's several $100 million. That's several $100 million that a public company probably wouldn't spend. They would really approach it differently. We are basically rebuilding these stores down to the studs, new floor, new walls, new everything. I wish it were only $1 million per store. It's more than that. That's a lot. If you were to ask any retailer, any restaurant, they would say that's a little bit crazy. But for us, again, it goes back to we're trying to really reimagine our stores. This is not just a remodel. This is also allowing us to put in new equipment for new platforms, which is a big deal for us. So some of the before and after, again, trying to bring a store like the top left that is probably 12 to 15 years old to more of a modern day. The inside, you can see, is completely redone with digital, different hues and tones and color textures, new cabinetry to try to just evoke a different emotion as our brand evolves. And when you do that right, you get some brand love. And so people I was telling a story earlier, people have sent me letters that said, my child is choosing between college A and college B. I want him to go to college B, but the Wawa's at college A, so they're choosing there. I'm like, that's nuts. And they've offered me money to open up a store at college B. So this is just a little glimpse of when you do all that right, hopefully other places and other markets will start to clamor for your business model. And so whether it's Myrtle Beach, whether it's Chicago to Orlando, whether it's South Carolina, and the reality is we have a lot of growth, believe it or not, in our core market, we think, and also continued in Florida. So we have a lot of time to spend there. We are still really a regional company trying to learn to become a multi-regional company over time. Our aspiration is to be the best, not the biggest. And so what does that look like by 2020? We'll close in at the end of 2020 on 1,000 stores if we're lucky. We'll have a rebranded fleet. You'll see offers on fresh food and the way we approach food that'll be more like a restaurant and less like a convenience store, which we've really been working towards for years. And then that customer experience. We're really striving always to continue to have the right people deliver the friendliest experience, and with all the basics perfect. It's always clean, it's always fast, and that's really tough in our business. Digital will have a new, as I mentioned earlier, a new place in our experience. We want to leverage digital to really make the convenience experience the most convenient. And as well, the other element is to get to know you better. When you start to shop and pay on a device, we can start to understand your behaviors like an Amazon has done on the internet for years, and then market to you differently, which we think long-term is a big deal. Still privately held. I get the question of when you go in public. Never. The good news is if you want to work and get stock, just come to work for us. We'll give it to you free. And company owned. So there you go. There's a little bit about Wawa. Hopefully it gives you a sense on a broad scale and a little bit more specific on details around real estate. I know we have some time for questions, but I'll pause there for a moment. And I'm not sure, I think the room's small enough that we don't need mics or anything like that, right? So good.
Just one question I have. Traveling to other parts of the country, even when you get to Lancaster, you've got Sheets, you've got Turkey Hill, you have runners.
Mm-hmm.
How long do you expect, you kind of had this market to yourself. Speedway bought Hess, but it seems like that's the gas station bologna sandwich that turns green. It's been sitting there for 4 days.
You said that, not me.
Do you anticipate, I know to a lesser extent, it's a chain out of Maryland.
Royal Farms.
Yeah, but are you anticipating someone else making it just seems like you really had this market to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, when you look across the country, C-stores per capita, as many Wawas as there are, we do not have as high penetrated C-stores per capita in our markets, largely because in the industry people would view us as difficult to go up against. So Royal is doing that in some cases, so in Pennsylvania, in New Jersey. So no, I don't think we think about that. One of the things that we're really driving after is if I put one of our new stores up against the best in the industry, no matter where we are, we can win. But it's if someone came in a big way, and I think beyond C-stores, I think it really a share of stomach. So if some fast casual chain or if some other chain that really had a unique, quick, fresh offer, if they came and penetrated the area quickly, what would that look like and do to us? So one of the strategies around that is make all of our old stores look new. So don't give them the benefit of new and shiny. We want to take that benefit away. And then continue to do what we're doing in terms of experience and food offer. So in the convenience stores, people always ask, well, what's your agreement with Sheets? There is none, but I can tell you in Lancaster and further down in Virginia and further down in Maryland, where we have 45 of our stores compete directly with them, neither of us are having a lot of fun. So I think for us to level, go that direction or them to come this way, it's just, there's other places in the country you'd want to go first. So they're the one we worry about the most. Quick Trip QT based out of Tulsa, another really well-run organization, but a little bit more like your commentary around Speedway. Speedway and others we watch. We're focused in on Tony Kenny, who's the CEO of Speedway, is a good guy, runs a good organization, but it is really sort of a traditional convenience store model, and we don't economically make a lot of money there. So, yeah, we worry about it. Yeah. 12. All right. Well done.
Are they going to be open remodels, and what are you going to do with store number 1?
Shut off the camera. Are they going to be open during remodels? So with fuel, traditionally we've said no to that. Internally, largely because of our high quality assurance standards. The amount of work we're doing would require us to cordon off certain parts of the store, and we just think from a quality assurance, food safety, it's not something we want to do. We are keeping our fuel stores, the fuel court open during the internal remodel. Remodels for us, because of the nature of it, are taking, our goal is 28 days, or about 30 on average right now. It's a long time. So people's behaviors change. On fuel, we want to be there, and there'll be a kiosk on the fuel court to sell some of your traditional products, Coke, smokes, things like that, where people have more of a daily habit. And they're the products that come back the least quick after we reopen, so we want to keep that behavior in place. But no, inside, no. Store 1, we are building a new store. So store 1 is the first Wawa on McDade Boulevard in Folsom. We are building a new store within a stone's throw, a beautiful new store. And there's been some sports talk personalities who have taken to the radio waves when they heard about this last year and said, boy, how can Wawa close store 1? And it needs to be a museum. And we don't think of ourselves that highly, to be honest. There's a unique real estate structure with store 1. We don't own it. The owner wants it back, which isn't an angle we'll really take. So store 1 will most likely close, and we will reopen the new store at the same time, block away. And we recognize there's some customers that have been literally going to that store since it opened for 52 years. And so we're going to do some unique things with those customers to make sure. And the new store will have tons of memorabilia from store one to make sure that it's kept alive in spirit.
A great presentation, Chris.
Thanks.
Can you talk a little bit about your site selection process from A to Z, where it gets to senior management and how developers
Sure.
be involved?
I will do my best, and Greg Harvey, who's a senior person in our real estate team, can fill in afterwards one-on-one. So we have our internal network of real estate managers. We have an external network of developers and brokers, some which we call preferred and some which are not preferred. That is simply more about process and governance and agreement early on. I, as you know, grew up in finance, so I'm a believer of open and transparency, so that gets you into the preferred bucket. And when you look at that, we network our different geographies, where we want to be, where we are, and we share that with our preferred developers. And we try to coordinate with them as best we can. And then when there's sites identified, that goes through our real estate manager first. Real estate manager obviously has the biggest say really in the process. The governance from there goes through the real estate leadership team with a lot of analytics. We use a 20-year discounted cash flow model for all of our stores with certain hurdle rates based on our weighted average cost of capital. And then there's a governance meeting once a month, does that feel? It probably feels weekly to you. And where myself, our chief operating officer, our CFO sit, and the real estate team brings us each site one by one. And so we had one on Monday, and we saw 5 sites. And we've gotten to a point in that process where we used to, at many times in a new market, I'm visiting the site physically. But at this point, someone on the senior team has seen the site physically. We've all worked through all the analytics, all of the site plans, and really, quite frankly, at that stage of the process, if it's gotten that far, our batting average of approval is close to 100%. I mean, it's the real estate, we're there just to make sure the real estate team's critical the day before. Totally vetted. We sign off at that point. We sign an internal project application which gives approval to the real estate manager to move forward at that point. If deal terms change within a certain scope, then it comes back, but that's infrequent. To answer your question. Let me go back there first.
Atlantic County, Cape May County, you've got some older stores, and with Sandy and some of the recent flooding down there.
Yep.
Can you talk about that market, how Atlantic City really needs as much support for development, and then your older stores, I know summertime they do really well, but it's an issue, not just for you, for retail, active and so forth. Any thoughts on what you guys are doing in that area?
Yeah. So Cape May County and Atlantic County, both very important to us, have been continue to be not as much new development for us in those counties simply because of the penetration rate we have. Atlantic County, Atlantic City obviously has a huge influence there. We have had some new store development on Route 30 right outside, continue to have some sites that we continue to look at there. Cape May County, we've had 2 stores we had 7 in Sandy that got totaled, if you will. We had 2 in the recent storm, Avalon and our West Avenue store in Ocean City. So we have to rebuild one internally, Avalon, fully. The other one is a remodel. So we did look at those. I mean, in full transparency, we love those stores from a branding perspective. In the summer, Avalon does close to $200,000 a week in sales. It's a huge store for us. It falls off to almost nothing in the winter. And when you look at a store like that, we wanted to make sure that economically it made sense for us to keep open. It does, so that's why we're going through with a remodel, a little advanced thanks to the storm. But that's the nature of the beast. I mean, I grew up a lot down the Jersey Shore, and one of the things there, if you don't stay open, which we've contemplated years ago, if you don't stay open during the winter, the locals aren't going to like you during the summer. So it's the right thing to stay open and just really staff and to the appropriate level during those times. So Atlantic County continues to have some opportunity, but the effect of what's happening in Atlantic City is something we continue to watch. And I still think last time I was at the Federal Reserve Bank, we look at economic indicators that the Atlantic County still has the highest unemployment of any county in the area. So something that we watch.
Hey, Chris, Villanova should be proud of you. I know Wawa's proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, CVS got a lot of publicity by stopping selling cigarettes. You just mentioned cigarettes. You guys consider, I've done bottom eight, but
Yeah.
you ever consider it?
No. So CVS, smart move. I mean, they're in the healthcare business, and their percent of sales on cigarettes was tiny. So the first thing I did when I heard that is I walked down to our cigarette team and I said, how much sales are we picking up? And they're like, yeah, not so much. They don't really sell that many. They have so many stores, and you add it up, it's a big number, but not a whole lot. So for us, the most important thing on cigarettes is we do it legally. We have a lot of internal process. We use internal teams and external teams to continually make sure that we're not selling to people underage, so that's really important to us. People get fired in our stores if you sell anyone underage on an audit or vice versa, and we're black and white on that because that's not how we do business. So we've not contemplated the idea of getting out of the cigarette business. We're going to watch what the FDA does and watch where the market goes. I would tell you cigarettes still are a big portion of our sales. They're not a big portion of our profits. The bigger portion of the need for cigarettes is people come to the store to buy cigarettes and they buy something else. And so we're trying to continue to evolve our food service model as we have been in strategic planning. I remember 2 decades ago we talked about this. Evolve food service to make that the daily habit, become more of a restaurant, because that business will go away. If you go down to our Broad and Walnut location, of interest there is you will not see cigarettes. Unlike our other stores, you sort of see the Tower of Death in the middle of the core there. It's because we really, in that store, in that location, an urban model, wanted to be a food and beverage only. And cigarette companies aren't dumb. They pay us a lot of money to show their cigarettes. I mean, and I'm not saying like it's a lot. So we bargained on that one store, but I'll tell you, that store has done more in food sales than any other store opening in our history. And we're monitoring that to understand if we have a different urban type model like that goes bigger, is that something we want to start to explore? Maybe not getting rid of cigarettes, but just hiding them out of the sight of minors, out of the sight of the people that don't like it. And the internal conflict comes down to is cigarettes and fresh food. How do you balance that? And that's something we just continue to fight about, basically. But no, you won't see them go away. Our customers still demand it. Yeah.
Your Broad and Walnut is great.
Thank you.
I just wanted to know of the 50 or so stores looking at, your type of sense of how many of those types of stores.
How many of those types of stores? More. There's a lot of internal politics, I would say, on that topic. We've grown up for 20 years in the fuel store business now. And because we're private, we do like to remain focused on our model. So for 19 of those years, we said, that's all we want to build. Real estate team, go out and build big fuel stores on 2 to 3 acres. That's the business we want to be in. And it's still the most successful and going in model. We opened Broad and Walnut last year really out of a recognition of the resurgence of Philadelphia. That there's a model there that our own internal model from food has really evolved to a point where we think it's very economic for us. So we opened that up as a test. The test worked. It's still a test, one store. We'll open up at least 2 others in Center City, Philly this year, which are underway, and continue that test. We've given direction to our real estate team to really begin to explore that in a much more aggressive way. So we're not quite sure until the networking's done of Philadelphia what that looks like, and potentially other urban cities in our footprint. But the results are such that, and we saw it even before Broad and Walnut. We remodeled mostly all of and expanded some of our Center City stores we had remaining in the CBD. And we saw such great results. That led to Broad and Walnut, and now even better results there has led to let's continue this journey. So more to come. Our team's just beginning to think about how to approach that internally, externally, and try to drive that bigger. But that could open up a whole bunch of new stores for us that we didn't have quite in the plans. Yeah.
You talked about closing non-performing stores.
Mm-hmm.
How long do you analyze those stores, and what are the steps that you take to maybe boost them up before you?
Yeah, that's a good question. We don't like to close them. So we closed one in Crownsville, Maryland last year. Greg will kick me now for that, which was the biggest PR nightmare we've had in a long time. The community said, why? And that was a close and abandoned, walk away, thanks. We have stores a couple miles away. A couple miles to your average Wawa customer in a neighborhood market could be in Europe. So we work internally first. Operations has a tremendous amount of rigor around analysis, people, things like that, that when they see a store start to get to certain sales levels, they're digging in themselves before any central action is taken. And that'll include new management, that'll include shifting other people there, that'll include localized promotions. We then have an annual process where we look at every store that should be closed, could be closed, maybe we should think about closing. We do a deep analysis on it. And really the key to that analysis at the end of the day is how much of those sales will transfer to another store. And that's the most sensitive to that. So we have some rigor around that. It's an area we do need to improve in. But we look at that, and we're closing stores on average that I would tell you, I'll just throw this out there, I can't say it's true, that probably our industry average it's better than the industry average in P&L profits will close. Because again, it's about investment and making sure that the brand is right. We're looking at putting $1 million into these stores, and that's again from a cash flow perspective. Why would you put $1 million into an existing store that it might look beautiful but the business isn't there, versus going and directing it to a new store maybe close by? So lots of rigor both at the operations level, at the real estate level, and then at the corporate level. There will be times, I would say we're hesitant for about a year. It's okay, this one's on the list, it feels like we're close. Go after it in a big way. Operations with certain tools they have in their toolkit, we'll revisit in a year, and if it really hasn't spiked up, it's closed.
Along that same theme, on any particular store, where's the misfire? I mean, rarely close, but when you do close.
Number one is real estate. It's always their fault. The reality of is real estate is number one, location and access I put together. Number two is the general manager in the store. I grew up in planning and analysis, so we look at all those factors. And when I say real estate, we have models that access, daytime pop, workforce, traffic, all that stuff. But if we miss on that, typically I'd guess, and guess is the right word, it's probably access related where we miss. The second thing really on an ongoing, beyond that, if you pass that hurdle, it's the team that's in that store. They can have as much as a 20% plus or minus differential on sales if they're not a good team. And so we have lots of measures around making sure that's the case. And to be true, 10% of our store teams today aren't optimized because they're not the right people in those stores. So, yeah.
Chris, we were talking about the 20-year discounted cash flow methods that you use analytics. And if you're in 6 different states, and you talk about real estate will come to you with Maine and Maine. So if the analytics are the same in each of the 6 states, does the pro forma, the expected performance of the store, are they the same or are they different based upon?
Yeah, I'll be clear. There's a 20-year cash flow, and then we break down by sub-market the factors that build up the variables of that cash flow. Sales growth, margins in the store, margins for gas. Really what the operations, fuel, and real estate team are doing is saying, what are my first-year sales and first-year gallons? The rest of it is formulaic, if you will, from our finance team on by market, though. So it's all a 20-year cash flow, but by market it'll be different because we have wildly different fuel margins in certain sub-markets and merchandise margins in others. The other part of that was we put in, it's a 20-year, so hold on, I want to make sure I'm answering your question. So it's by market. What was the other element of your question?
Just basically if the core market being the performance in, say, core market.
Yeah, okay.
Different than, say, New Jersey or Florida.
So we have, in traditional analysis, we have an internal rate of return that's our WACC plus our risk premium on top of that, where we look at, which is true across all of our core markets. Our non-core markets like Florida, we put together a generalized pro forma. We actually looked at it, which again, private company, we said, what will this store look like at a mature market state, not out of year one? And so we did some benchmark IRRs. I'm a fan of analysis. I'm not a fan of trying to get precision when you shouldn't. So we didn't know what those stores were going to look like. We've just now taken our 85 stores and really starting to understand the financials to build a more exacting return analysis on Florida. But for there, we go in with really a different perspective. It's a little bit more, is it the right site? We know we want to be in the market, and then build up from there. Yeah.
Chris, you mentioned in the presentation a few times as far as making your old stores look new.
Mm-hmm.
And as asphalt contractors, I've actually worked in a few of your stores. And I've seen
Thank you.
Where the difference between seal coating and kind of letting the parking lots go and then paving. Now, what's the future of Wawa maintaining those stores? What's the approach up top?
Yeah.
Looking at seal coating versus letting it go and then restarting kind of the parking lot?
Yeah, so I'll talk it at a broader level. in the daily grind and annual budgeting cycles of how things work, maintenance gets expensive. And so we have taken, I would say it's certain aspects of our business a little bit more too close to the bone, a la seal coating, than we should have. So we've gone to more recently a total cost of ownership perspective, and we're trying to make sure different elements of preventative maintenance, overall maintenance, we sort of let that go on autopilot. It's no longer, if you will, and this may sound foolish, thrown into the bucket of annual planning to say, okay, well, let's do 10 less seal coating so we can take that money and invest it over here. It's sort of, let's let that go on its own. So we're trying to get better at that. Not perfect, but trying to get better at it. Our stores also, as you probably know, just get so much volume that everything expires its lifetime much quicker than it should. So yeah, it's an area that we continue to have development on. We do some of that seal coating and line striping in-house now during the summers, and also in the off season. But so I don't have a specific on that
It's really
exact
tricky
one.
with logistics because you have many customers coming in and kind of barricading through your barricades to get some.
No, never. It's called brand love.
It does take a while to not disrupt business, make sure people know you're still open, so I can see how
It's difficult. You're absolutely right.
Talk about average sales volume per store with or without pay.
I could. Any other questions? We don't talk specific store sales, but I would say, your average Panera does $45,000 a week in sales. Our average fuel store would do much more than that in terms of just what happens on food and beverage. Throw out cigarettes and gas, so multiples. And our legacy stores would do still multiples. So it goes anywhere from when we hit $75,000 a week in a non-gas store, lights start to blink of not enough. And we have stores that last week did $350,000 in sales, so on the bookends of that.
Guys, we're going to take one last question.
I was really going right, so is there any on the left? I didn't want to ignore you here.
You just got approved for beer sales in your store. Is that a trend that you're going to pursue?
Beer. So Pennsylvania's laws are very current and flexible. So we sell beer in all of our Virginia and Florida stores. We do it quite well, good value, and safely and legally, and in other states just not allowed. So we, working with some friends of ours in government, decided that we wanted to, like Sheetz has done on the other side of the state, just really put in a little marker here to say that can we do it, and yes we can, and we can do it reasonably. And so unfortunately what that requires us is to buy an R license, which we have, which is a restaurant license, which means we have to take, we only have 3 of these stores in the chain. One's in Chadsford. It's a 7,400 square foot store. It's that big. So it allows us to remodel to meet the needs of the R license. Seating, separate register, all of those wonderful things. So it is not a model that we could expand beyond one other Pennsylvania store that we have. So it's really a model to say to the government, to the public, that us, like Wegmans, like Acme, like others, can sort of do this in a reasonable way. Unfortunately, we have to build a cafe, if you will, for it, and we really don't want people drinking in our store. So we've self-imposed a 1 beer per person limit. We really want you to take it and go safely home and drink it where you're going, so or when you get there. Did I say that? And that's the extent of it at this point. So we do not have approval yet from the Liquor Control Board, the LCB. We do have local approval, and you can just see it's a cat and dog fight because they actually put a ton of restrictions on us that were illegal at the local level. So we had to, fight through that a bit. So we're through that, and now we're up at the state level, which should get approval soon.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Chris. We
Thank you.
appreciate it.